It was Friday and I left the hangar earlier than usual. The guys had things they needed to take care of, and after that they would probably leave since I wasn't there. I was looking forward to the evening with my lovely wife. We'd known each other for almost 6 years and had been married for it was 3.5 years ago that we both turned 29. Our intimacy had been a bit slow lately, and over the past month or so she seemed a little distracted. I decided to do everything I could to make the evening special: a bottle or two of good wine, a couple of rib steaks from the butcher, and roses from the florist. I planned to light some candles at the supermarket to try to find out what was bothering her. I wanted to show her how much I loved her and, with any luck, have an early night. I got home long before she did. I made sure the house was clean, put fresh sheets on the bed, and set up candles in the bedroom. I laid the table in the kitchen with our best silverware and napkins. I opened a bottle of wine to let it breathe. I placed the roses by the front door so she would see and smell them as soon as she walked in. She loves the scent of roses. I prepared the potatoes for my signature scalloped potatoes in the oven. I sliced the potatoes thinly and drizzled them with olive oil, adding salt, pepper, and a little rosemary. I used mustard powder to sprinkle on the steaks, adding just the right touch of flavor. Everything was ready for her arrival. I was quite pleased with how everything had turned out. All that was left to do was wait for my other half to show up, so I could wow her, and show her how much I cared. I was hoping this feeling would last all weekend. I heard the front door open just as I was laying out the potato slices on the baking tray and the oven was preheating. I heard Zoe call out to me saying, "Richard, are you home?" I thought, my car is parked on the road in front of the house, and the roses by the door should have made it obvious I was here. I had just finished sprinkling the rosemary on the potatoes when I heard her say, "All right, we got here first. We can sit on the couch when he arrives. It'll look better if we're sitting and he's standing. He won't be startled when we tell him." I stepped into the living room, where I was met by a shocked Zoe and another man. I immediately recognized him as the man Zoe had been talking about. Over the past couple of months, he'd become the new deputy head of HR. He was just over 180 centimeters, tall, fit, blonde, handsome, and a little arrogant. I must have had a confused expression on my face because he joked, "Hey Dick, I'm Gerald. In a day or two I'll be taking this more seriously." He shook my hand firmly. He gave me a very firm handshake. He stopped just short of crushing my hand. What a jerk. I just stood there. He smiled at me. Zoe spoke up, "Richard, we need to tell you something." Was he staying for dinner? I could defrost an extra steak and Gerald would eat it. She continued, "I'm going to spend the weekend with Gerald." I didn't see that coming. "What?" Gerald stepped forward. "This will be good for you. I'm going to teach her things you can only dream of. You'll enjoy being with her much more after this. It's only for one weekend and she'll never do anything like this again. No, never." I started to say something. I had to snap out of my shock. "If she does, I'll divorce her." Gerald walked right up to me, looked down at me and said in a threatening voice, "No, you won't, or you can't stop me." He repeated it in the same threatening tone. "No, I can't stop you, but I promise you'll have trouble walking on the day you file for divorce. From that day on, your life will be filled with pain. It's up to you." He stood next to Zoe and smiled at me, then continued in a normal voice, "She's going to spend the weekend with me, and I'm going to teach her a lot. She'll come back to you, and I'll never sleep with her again. She'll stay loyal to you." After this weekend, he looked at Zoe and said, "What a joke, calling her sweetheart." I was stunned and didn't know what to do. "Have you already been together?" I asked, assuming it from the way he called her sweetheart. "No," she replied. "That would be cheating." "I'll get you a beer," Zoe offered. I grumbled, "I think I can at least do that myself." Gerald placed his hand on her shoulder and said, "Give him a minute, sweetheart. He's going to need time to process this. We've been talking about it for weeks, and we just dropped it on him in a few minutes. He needs time to really process it." I realized that this is inevitable. It was funny, they always do it. It was clear he had done this before. I rushed to the kitchen, thinking Zoe wanted to follow me, but he held her back. In that moment, it was probably a good idea on his part. What was with him calling her sweetheart? That really infuriated me. What an idiot. When I got to the kitchen, I saw the open bottle of wine. I poured a glass and took a big gulp. Wine wasn't the right drink for this situation. I stormed into the garage where I kept my beer fridge. I almost tore the door off its hinges when I opened it, grabbing a bottle of crafty old hen. I slammed the fridge door shut. What a couple of idiots, I thought to myself. I looked around for a bottle opener but couldn't find one. It must have been in the kitchen. I didn't want to go back inside until I had gathered my thoughts. I used alternative methods we learned in the army. I hit the bottle cap with the edge of a tool on a sharp corner of the workbench, and it came off. It worked then, and it worked now. I didn't pay attention to it. I'm sure many Land Rovers have large chunks of metal sticking out of their trunks. How was I going to deal with this? I had to deal with this. I took a few minutes to calm down, then I had a plan. I walked to the other end of the garage, opened the cabinet, took what I needed, and tucked it into the back pocket of my trousers. I took a big gulp of beer, finished it, grabbed another, and headed back to. I went to the kitchen and opened the bottle with a bottle opener. I also got something else ready. I put the largest knife from the knife block into the back of my pants with the other item. I was just showing off. I wasn't planning to end up in jail. I felt confident in my plan. I took a deep breath and walked back into the living room. These cheating idiots were sitting on my couch holding hands. I looked at them. They quickly let go of each other's hands and scooted apart. Good. The balance of power had shifted a little in my favor. It seemed they were waiting. I pulled out my phone and tossed it onto the coffee table. It was clear he was recording. He stood up, noticing my anger, and spread his arms. Listen, buddy. It's only going to be for one weekend. That irritated me even more. A jerk like him would never be a buddy. He glanced at my phone. I think you're recording this, which is fine. But you know what'll happen if this gets posted on social media? The pain you'll feel won't even compare to having both of your legs broken. I want to record this for my protection, and strangely enough for yours and hers as well. I think you should send this to work since I'm the deputy head of HR. All complaints come through me. I've got friends who will let me know if anyone tries to bypass me. It's not about what you know, it's about who you know. I understand. I answered seriously, looking up at him. I have a proposal on how we can handle this, I said. You just smirked at me. Arrogant jerk, I added, nodding toward the phone. For the record, tell me what you plan to do with my wife. He puffed up like a peacock. I'm going to take your wife away for the weekend and give her an experience she's never had before. She'll learn new, and there are some exciting ways we can please each other. Then she'll come back to you much more prepared to give you the pleasure you've been missing. He smirked, though probably not until the next weekend because she'll be so sore she won't even be able to walk straight. He chuckled. I didn't believe a single word of that. That's nonsense. What happens after that? I asked. She comes back home to you, having experienced the best time of her life. She promised me she'll remain faithful to you every single day for as long as she lives. She'll show you new skills and techniques that'll drive you crazy. I looked at Zoe. Zoe, is this? What do you want? Yes, please, Richard. It's just one weekend, and after that I promise I'll be faithful to you. I asked, and what if she doesn't keep her promises? Just like she promised to be faithful to me on our wedding day, what if she cheats on me again? Will you come back or you could torment her physically like you've threatened to do to me? Or what if some god of sex shows up and offers her something even better? My voice dripped with sarcasm, which clearly didn't register with him. He looked confused. I guess no one had ever asked him something like that before. She promised me she'll stay. I'll be loyal to you after this weekend. I don't believe everything she says right now. Here's the deal. I'll fight you for her. He was a few centimeters taller and broader in the shoulders than me, and a little younger. He just smiled. He was an arrogant jerk. If that's what you want, we can do it. I don't want to waste the weekend is coming up, so let's settle this here and now. I'm in. Zoe pressed her palms to her mouth, the way she does when she's nervous. 2 men fighting over me. How exciting. There was a spark in her eyes. I looked at her and growled, I'm not fighting for you. You're not worth it. I'm fighting for myself. The spark in her eyes faded, and her face became serious. I turned to him and said, if I win, you'll leave and never speak to her again, not even at work. If you win, you get to spend the weekend with her. I won't divorce her, but there are rules. He still had that smug look on his face. All right, let's hear them. The first one is, if he falls on his back, he loses no knife, no weapons, and everything else is fair game. The winner gets to decide whether to call the police. Do you have any knives? He smirked at me, so I pulled out a large 30 cr butcher knife from the waistband of my pants and placed it on the coffee table. His eyes widened. And I suppose you've got a gun? He asked, still smirking. I reached behind my back and pulled out an air pistol, an exact replica of a combat pistol. I don't know if he knows about guns, but that gun looked real, especially when I pulled it out. He wasn't quite as confident, but he didn't hide his arrogance. I'm going to beat the hell out of you. Before I put you on your back, do your worst. Just remember the 3 rules: no knives, no weapons, and no police. Everything else is fair game. I'm not stupid. I get it. You little punk. You'll pay for this. I might even keep her with me for the whole week. At least I'll respect myself for trying to defend my marriage. I'm not ashamed of what I did. Zoe changed her mind. She recognized my behavior and determination from the past. Things might not go the way she had planned. Please stop. I've changed my mind. Richard, don't do this. Gerald, leave now. I don't want this anymore. She realized that I was gaining the upper hand. I was on the back foot. Sweetheart, you started this with him weeks ago, and I'm going to finish it here and now one way or another. Grab your phone and record it. I need proof. She was crying, and this was no longer in her control. I motioned toward the kitchen door after you said to Gerald. He walked through the kitchen, and I went over to the back door and grabbed a few things. As soon as he stepped outside, I kicked him in the back, sending him face first into the flower bed. He scrambled to his feet and turned around, eyes blazing with anger. I just smiled and said, no rules, not entirely true, but that didn't matter. The point was made. I was furious. I wanted the balance of power to shift even further in my favor. It would have been nice if he had fallen on his back, but I didn't expect it. He swung at me with his right hand. He might as well have called ahead to warn me about the punch. It was so slow that I easily blocked it, and then threw the contents of my right. I poured salt, pepper, rosemary, and mustard powder into his face. He clutched his face, screaming. I tried to push him down onto his back, but he managed to step back. He lowered his hand and looked at me through tears with his snout running from his nose. I just walked up and punched him in the stomach as hard as I could. He doubled over but didn't fall. Now he was holding one hand on his stomach and the other on his face. I needed to hit him in the groin with all my strength. He collapsed onto his knees and started reaching. He didn't have enough hands to hold everything that was hurting. I tried to push him onto his back, but he resisted, so I punched him hard in the face. He wobbled on his knees but still didn't fall onto his back. My right fist landed on his nose and blood sprayed everywhere. That had to hurt. You don't see that kind of pain on TV. I slapped him across the face with my open hand. His head snapped back, and then I hit him with the back of my hand, which was a dumb move, and my hand hurt like hell. I leaned in close to him and quietly said, "You can stop this. All you have to do is lie on your back." I raised my hand again, and his knees buckled, and he collapsed onto his side and then rolled onto his back. The power balance was fully in my favor. I glanced at Zoe, and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I couldn't tell why she was crying. I grabbed Gerald by the hair and yanked him to his feet. I wasn't gentle. I opened the gate to our garden and told him, "Remember this. You will never speak to her again." I also told him that if the police came to visit me, this beating would seem like nothing. I shoved him through the gate and closed it behind him. The smell was gone too. He had clearly soiled himself. Zoe was still there, recording everything. I told her to send me a copy of that video to my phone. I then walked past her into the kitchen and washed my hands at the sink. Gerald would smell of rosemary from what I'd thrown on him earlier. I went upstairs and Zoe followed me. I grabbed a suitcase from the spare bedroom and started taking her underwear out of the drawer and packing it into the suitcase. "What are you doing?" she said, watching me as I continued to pack her things. I took the suitcase downstairs, opened the front door, and threw it outside. I picked up my phone and called her mother. "Hello, Richard. What a pleasant surprise. What can I do for you, Mary?" "I'm divorcing her." I hung up the phone and sent her the audio recording of Gerald boasting about how he was going to spend the weekend with her daughter. She said that's exactly what she wanted. I turned off my phone, took Zoe by the hand and led her out. then closed and locked the door behind her. I ignored the knocking, and after a while it stopped. I thought the police would come, but they never showed up. Maybe Gerald was too ashamed to admit he'd been beaten by someone smaller than him. No matter. I spent Saturday sorting through all of Zoe's belongings and doing some calculations. When my grandparents passed away, the house was left to my sister and me. I took out a small mortgage to buy out her half. I'm sure I'll need to reimburse Zoe for the portion she paid towards the mortgage. I edited the video and audio clips and sent them to every email address I could find at Zoe's workplace. I'm sure Gerald made some enemies along the way. I'm sure they'll make sure this reaches the head of HR on Sunday morning. Zoe's father came by to pick up the rest of her things. He looked at me and asked, "Is there any way?" I think you can guess what my expression was saying. He didn't finish the question, but we shook hands as he left. I suspect Zoe's parents were one of the reasons the divorce went so quietly. It's been just over 4 months since I filed for divorce. It was a Saturday afternoon. I was in the garage cleaning my air guns. I had a shooting competition the next day. I heard the doorbell ring. I was about to get up when someone called out, "It's okay, It was Clara, the woman who kept my house in order. She appeared at the garage door. There was a lady at the door who said she was my wife. She was around 170 centimeters tall, with blonde hair and around 30 years old, maybe a little more. I'd put the kettle on and left her in the living room. I went to the living room and it was Zoe. She looked nice, but she seemed about 5 years older. She didn't look well. This was the first time I'd seen her since I'd kicked her out. "What do you think? I'm paying you the agreed amount for the house." She looked at me. "Richard, I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake." He convinced me and promised everything would be okay. He told me that if you really loved me, you would let me go through with it. He sounded so convincing. He even had one of the girls tell me how it worked for her. "Is that other girl still married?" I knew the answer, but she wasn't sure. "I don't know. I don't work there anymore. After everyone I was so ashamed when I found out about the video and audio recordings. No one wanted to talk to me, so I had to leave." I have to ask, are you still seeing Gerald? "No, I never intended to." He kept this side of the deal and never spoke to me again, but he didn't stay long. He missed a few days of work, and by then everything had fallen apart and they kicked him out of the building. I heard it was another husband who beat him up. It wasn't me when I dragged him to the back gate. I warned him, but the police never. He showed up at my door, but I kept looking over my shoulder and stayed away. He deserves it. He's not a decent man. Decent men don't sleep with other people's wives. Please, Richard, can we try again? I'll never do something so stupid again. Please. I really love you. I thought it was for your own good, but I'm sorry, honey. It was a mistake. I never should have done it. She pleaded with me at that moment. Clara entered carrying a tray with cups. She put a teapot, a milk jug, and some biscuits on the coffee table and said, "You might want to let it steep for a while." Then she disappeared back into the kitchen. Zoe watched her leave. "Or have you already found someone to replace me?" she asked. "That's Clara. She cleans here once a week. She's a cleaner at our hangar. I work so much that I don't have time for it myself. I had to take out an extra mortgage just to pay you. So is there any chance?" I poured myself some tea and took a sip. It was weak, and I should have waited, just like Clara had suggested. "It's been almost 4 months and I haven't heard a word from you. You haven't contested the divorce. Why now?" She looked down at her knees, embarrassed. "I know I made a terrible mistake. I wanted to give you time. I hoped you'd miss me. I had to gather the courage. My mom said that if you love me, you could give me another chance. Dad said I'm wasting my time. But I had to try, Richard. Please." I took another sip of tea. Clara came in with a tray full of cleaning supplies and headed upstairs. "I'm just going to tidy up upstairs. There's nothing in your bedroom you shouldn't see." She chuckled softly. "Hope you put away all your bondage gear." With that, she ran upstairs without waiting for an answer. I looked at Zoe. "That's her little joke, you know. We never got into anything like that. Maybe we should have. But you never wanted to explore anything out of the ordinary except with that idiot. Even doggy style was too much for you." Zoe looked at me, but I didn't answer her question. I was still angry with her, but I kept myself in check. "What do you think? You blindsided me, telling me you wanted to spend the weekend with another man. You planned it for weeks and gave me 2 minutes to decide. You even threatened me with violence if I didn't agree. You got excited at the thought of two men fighting over you, hoping your lover would win so you could enjoy your weekend of wild sex. Then you'd come back and expect everything to go back to normal. But for me, that I realized I'd made a mistake, and that Gerald would never win. I didn't want you to go to jail because I put you in that situation. I'm really sorry, Zoe. I loved you with all my heart, but you killed that love when you told me you wanted to spend the weekend with him. For the past few weeks you've been distant, quiet, and I thought something was wrong. I tried to cheer you up, but now I know why you were planning to sleep with that jerk. I had a special dinner planned, and there were flowers. I was right there. I was there for you, but you listened to that guy instead. You didn't come and talk to me. You turned it into a done deal by threatening me with violence. How can you do that to someone you claim to love? I'll never be able to trust you again. In fact, it hurts just to be around you. She didn't touch her tea. I think it's time for you to go. I told her. She stood up and headed for the door. I opened the front door for her. She looked at me and said, "I love you. I'm really sorry, but I understand." I threw one more line at her. "Remember that girl who told you about Gerald?" "Yes, Karen Prescott. She's about to become Karen Jones. Her husband is making her take back her maiden name." She turned and walked away in tears. I didn't watch where she went. I wondered how Clara was doing upstairs. I went up and saw that my bedroom door was open. I unbuttoned my shirt and tossed it on the floor. Clara would probably scold me for that later, but I didn't care. I stepped into the bedroom and saw Clara lying on my bed, the blanket pulled back, wearing black stockings and a smile. "I couldn't find your bondage gear,"